Nilo Arden arrived on Valen's Fall beneath overcast skies and soil that shimmered faintly in the evening light. The shuttle landed with a mechanical sigh, and the hatch opened to the scent of salt, pollen, and something metallic buried deep in the wind. His transfer orders were simple: observe the planet's ecological patterns, manage human outpost gardens, and stay out of political entanglements. Valen's Fall was a council-shared world, a place once abandoned after a resource war and now carefully repopulated with selected aliens and a few human specialists. There were rules: no terraforming, no genetic adjustments, no large machines, only quiet presence. Nilo didn't mind that. Quiet suited him. His first glimpse of the native life came as he stepped through the outpost's perimeter gates and saw a row of pale blue fronds curling inward as if shy at his approach. They glowed faintly in twilight glimmerthorns. They were called delicate things that opened only at night and drank moonlight through translucent tips. He knelt beside one, removed his glove, and brushed a finger gently along the stem. It quivered, then relaxed, as if accepting him. "You'll ruin it doing that," came a voice behind him. "It takes them days to recover from foreign oils." Nilo looked up and found a pair of slitted, luminous eyes watching him from behind a sculpted metal mask. The alien had no mouth he could see, but her voice seemed to resonate from within. Her chest soft but cold. Her skin was a deep sea green, marked with silver streaks that shimmered when she moved. "I didn't touch the petals," Nilo said. The alien tilted her head. "The stem is more sensitive." He stood slowly, brushing dust off his knees. "I'll be more careful next time." "There shouldn't be a next time. These plants aren't your experiment." "No," he agreed. "They're not. I'm just here to understand them." She paused, as if measuring his sincerity. Then she turned and walked away without a word. Later that night, when the moons rose and cast their pale gold glow over the plains, Nilo asked one of the other humans who she was. "That's Kare," said Marvin, the logistics officer. "She's one of the local artists. Makes those kinetic sculptures the council drools over. Temperamental, doesn't like us much." "Does she live inside the settlement?" Marvin chuckled. "No. She lives in the cliffs, won't stay in any structure built by outsiders. Says the walls smell like iron and dishonesty." Nilo wasn't sure what that meant, but he understood the instinct to stay apart. The following days passed in quiet rhythms. Nilo walked the edge of the bloomfields in the mornings, recording plant growth patterns, sketching in his journal, and collecting spore samples to study under the outpost's modest microscope. He spoke rarely with the other humans. They were good people, but loud in a way he found exhausting: music in the lounge, jokes over the comms, games during the long rains. He preferred the fields, the soft rustle of leaves, the small pulses of color in the moss when a footstep passed too near, the warmth of silence. He saw Kare again on the third evening. She stood in the center of a circle of wine spires, tall metal rods that caught gusts and transformed them into tonal hums. Her hands moved with delicate precision, adjusting their angles, shaping the music of the air. He watched from a distance, not daring to speak. Until she turned. "Do you think silence is peaceful or lonely?" she asked. He blinked. "Both, sometimes. You watch like someone who prefers silence to company." "Maybe," he admitted, "but it depends on the company." She stepped closer, the wind catching the thin cloth of her sleeves and wrapping it around her like seaweed. Her face remained partially hidden behind her sculpted mask, but he could feel her gaze on him. "You're different from the last one." She tried to catalog everything like it was a puzzle to solve. "And what do you think I'm doing?" "You listen," Kare said simply, "even when you don't understand." Nilo didn't answer. She turned back to her wine spires, and he remained watching until the moons rose high enough that her sculptures began to sing. The bond between them formed not through conversation, but through presence. He found himself walking the Bloomfields at dusk, hoping to hear the distant hum of her installations. Sometimes she would appear at the edge of the cliff gardens, hands stained with powder from crushed petals, eyes distant as she studied the patterns in the moss. Once, he brought her a handful of wild-growing ice ferns he'd found blooming by the river. She accepted them without thanks, but she braided them into her cloak the next time they met. Another time, she guided him without a word to a small hollow, where the night blossoms opened only once every 6 years. They stood side by side as the petals unfurled, releasing tiny motes of blue light that drifted upward like fireflies. "These only bloom when the moon weeps," she murmured. "Weeps. It's a phrase in my language," Kare said. "It means the air feels too heavy for silence." Nilo nodded. "I know the feeling." When the message came, it arrived through encrypted channels at dawn. Nilo was in the greenhouse, checking the root samples, when the alert chimed once discreet. Unmistakable. Directive 01. Initiate phase drawdown. Packlight. Return roots active. Leave no trace. He stood still for a long time, his hands still, buried in soil. He had known this would come. Every human in the outer colonies had. The Council's pressure had grown unbearable. Trade embargoes, policy restrictions, silent threats. Humanity had chosen to vanish, not fight. And now, the time had come. The greenhouse fell still, the fans powered down, the lights dimmed to sleep mode blue. Nilo walked outside into the rising wind. He found Kare by the cliffs, stacking stones into a shape that made no sense to him, too fluid to be a wall, too fragile to be a sculpture. "I'm leaving," he said. She did not look up. "All of you?" "Yes." A long pause. The sea below crashed against the cliffside in slow, rhythmic bursts. "Because they told you to. Because we chose to," Nilo said softly. Finally, she turned. Her eyes searched his face. "And what do I do with what you've left behind?" He opened his hand. Inside was a single pressed glimmerthorn, the first one he'd ever touched, now flattened between 2 layers of clear polymer. "Remember me," he said. Her fingers closed around it without speaking. He left before the wind could carry his name away. The settlement emptied over 3 days. Humans packed in silence. Data was scrubbed, samples buried. Shelters collapsed with precision to leave no trace. When the last shuttle rose into the sky, the field where the Bloom House once stood was already returning to moss. From the cliffs, Kare watched the sky long after it had gone still. The glimmerthorn pressed in her palm pulsed faintly, as if remembering the hand that had once touched it. The first thing Teva Jin noticed about the Council orbital station was how clean it was. The glass walks shimmered with unnatural clarity, curving through the station's upper levels like strands of spider silk. Alien engineers moved in fluid lines, their bodies marked with runes of status and species. Silence here was not an absence, but a language structured, cultivated, respectful. As she stepped onto the platform, her boots made no sound. Even her breath seemed loud. This was not a human place. It never had been. Teva tightened the strap across her chest and wheeled her case behind her. The transparent material of the walkways gave way beneath her steps, revealing the endless stars below. Her reflection shimmered over it, dark brown curls tucked under a scarf. Eyes that never fully relaxed, skin shadowed by sleepless nights. She had been assigned to the Glassworks Conservatory, a joint diplomatic installation meant to showcase Council craftsmanship and promote cultural harmony. Officially, she was here to assist with adaptive heat flow engineering. Unofficially, everyone knew what that meant. Humanity's presence had to be softened, refined, their functionality cloaked in aesthetic contribution. So, the Council had sent for a glassblower. The conservatory was nothing like she'd expected. There were no furnaces, no soot, no burn scars on the floor. It was airy, filled with floating temperature fields and suspended tools that hovered according to the artist's intent. The space itself seemed alive, changing subtly depending on who entered. Teva's first sculpture shattered within 15 seconds of forming. "Your fire's too angry," said a voice from above. She turned to find a figure perched high on a beam of translucent material, thin, crystalline wings folded at his back. His skin was pale and almost translucent, shot through with veins of shifting color. His eyes, faceted like gemstones, shimmered in shifting gold. "You don't belong here," he added. "Your work smells like impatience." Teva narrowed her eyes. "And you smell like smugness." He grinned, sharp teeth gleaming. "Ah, truth. Humans are always good at that." "Who are you?" "Minholari," he said, gliding down to the floor in a series of elegant wing beats. "Glass composer for the core exhibit. I'm Teva Jin, human furnace technician." Furnace, he repeated with a flick of one wing. So primitive. So our teeth, she shot back. But you seem proud of yours. For a moment, they simply stared at one another. Then, surprisingly, Min laughed. Good, he said. Maybe you'll survive here after all. They didn't become friends. Not at first. Myn was arrogant, meticulous, and dismissive of Teva's methods. He called her designs box-shaped emotions and insisted that her glass lacked breath. She accused his work of being all form, no function. Their early days were filled with tension-cool remarks, long silences, moments where one would undo what the other had built. Yet somehow, they kept meeting at the edge of the main sculpting chamber. They argued over temperature, gradients, color refraction, and the emotional philosophy of curves. But beneath the words was something else. Curiosity, pull, recognition. On the 23rd day, Min entered the workshop while Teva was alone. She stood before her latest piece, a spiraling sphere that glowed from within, rotating slowly as heat moved through its veins. What's it meant to be? He asked. She hesitated. It's what it feels like when you know someone hates you, but they still watch you. Min tilted his head. So, loneliness? No, she said quietly. Hope. They didn't speak for a while after that. Weeks passed. The conservatory prepared for the mid-cycle diplomatic exhibition, a chance for council species to view the station's art installations and judge whether humans could remain part of the initiative. Myn was under pressure to deliver a centerpiece sculpture, something that embodied unity. He claimed he didn't care what the others thought, but his sleepless nights said otherwise. Teva found him one night sitting in front of a shattered workbench, shards of pale blue glass scattered like broken feathers. You know what your problem is, she said, stepping around the mess. Do tell, he muttered. You're trying to make something that pleases everyone, but you don't like anyone. He looked up. You think I like you? She smiled. No, but you respect me, and that's a beginning. Min stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the wall, and turned off the room's lights. In the darkness, the glass fragments began to glow faintly, residual heat lingering in their cores, pulsing gently like stars. You see that? He whispered. Yes, then, come help me finish it. Their collaboration was unofficial. No one knew they were working together at night, shaping heat and memory into forms that transcended species. They didn't talk much, but their hands moved in sync. Teva would heat, Min would shape, Min would bend, Teva would fuse. They argued. Yes, but the kind of arguments that deepened understanding. Not hostility, but friction that forged something new. Some nights when they finished a piece, they would sit in silence, watching it cool. Once, he offered her a crystalline fruit from his homeworld. It tasted like burnt sugar and wind. She didn't say thank you, but he smiled anyway. Once, she leaned her head against his wing as she fell asleep. He didn't move until morning. Then the message came. Teva had just finished aligning the last structure of the central sculpture when her COMM chip blinked red. Directive 01, drawdown in progress. Prepare to disengage. Departure in 72 hours. She stared at the words for a long time, heart stilled by a silence too deep for thought. She knew what it meant. Everyone in human space did. No more arguments. No more trying to explain. No more proving worth. Just leave. Vanish. Take everything worth taking and go. For a moment, she considered deleting the message, pretending it hadn't arrived. But she didn't. On her last night, Teva sat alone in the conservatory. The sculpture stood complete, a vast dome of spiraling glass threads that reflected heat signatures of those nearby. When you stood within, it showed your memory, your heartbeat, your unresolved questions. It was beautiful and unfinished. Min found her there just before dawn. You didn't come to final review, he said. I won't be here for it. He stiffened. What do you mean? She looked up. We're leaving. He blinked. Who is humans? Min stared at her as if she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. We're done trying to fit into spaces not meant for us, she said quietly. We've given so much, watched, adapted, bent ourselves into shapes that didn't feel like home. And still, we're guests. That's not true, he whispered, isn't it? He stepped forward, slowly, like approaching something fragile. I watched you work, he said. I learned from you, Not just craft, feeling, timing, doubt. You taught me things I didn't know I lacked. Then maybe you'll remember me when this chamber is filled with new names." He reached out hesitantly, then firmly. His fingers brushed her wrist, soft, electric. "I don't want to remember you," he said. She looked up. "Why?" "Because it means you'll be gone." They kissed only once. There beneath the dome of shifting light. It was not a passionate kiss, not desperate. It was a goodbye made with breath and trembling. When Min arrived at the conservatory the next morning, the sculpture was still there but dim. The temperature fields had faded. The resonance engine disconnected. It would never shine again the way it had when they built it together. In its center sat a single sealed glass sphere. Inside was a small flame, eternal, unflickering, a message etched into its base in human script: "For what we built beneath glass skies. If ever you want to start again, find the warmth." Min placed it on his private shelf. No one ever asked where it came from. But every cycle, when the stars shifted, he sat before it and remembered the only person who ever taught him how to feel the fire. The oceans of Siloon shimmered violet beneath the dusk, their tides shifting with a rhythm older than stars. Here, on the wet green cliffs of Colony for 117 knew, the wind carried the scent of salt and the silence of farewell. Ilia Torren stood barefoot at the edge of the field station, the soft biocloth of her uniform fluttering in the breeze. She was tall, sun-dark, with eyes the color of river rock, and scars along her forearms from coral stings she never spoke about. In one hand she held a cup of cooled char local algae tea, bitter but calming. In the other, she clutched a datapad, blinking softly with a new transmission. Phase closure initiated. Decommission all infrastructure. Evac in 96 hours. She didn't read it again. She didn't need to. It had always been coming, and she wasn't sure how to tell Esran. Esranthale was not human. He came from a world deep within the Zuran enclave, a watered welling species shaped by pressure and silence. He wore a thin hydration suit on land, translucent panels over his skin regulating temperature and fluid exchange. His eyes were large and silver, his skin a bluish shimmer that shifted depending on his mood. They had met 9 months ago when Esran had arrived as an interspecies liaison, tasked with monitoring the shared reef zones. Ilia, a lead marine biologist, had been less than thrilled. "I don't need a council babysitter," she'd snapped on the first day. "And I don't need another arrogant bipe wasting coral for statistics," he'd replied with polite venom. Yet, somehow, they'd found each other in the silence between storms. Ilia had taught him how to run his fingers across the symphony crab's shells to feel their song. Esran had shown her how the deep reef tendrils responded to sound and memory. They'd shared laughter over strange seaweed dishes and argued for hours about ethics in ecosystem mapping. And in the nights between, they'd swum together in the Kelpring Bay, the water glowing with bioluminescence, neither of them quite admitting what lived in the quiet space between their words. Ilia found Esran beneath the observation dome, hands curled around a tank of ripplefish. He was humming softly, a sound she knew was part of his native tongue. When he turned, she saw the way his gill flares retracted, a sign of worry. "You've heard," she said. "They sent it just now," he replied, voice low. "You're leaving." "We all are." He blinked slowly. "This isn't like the others. This place matters. You don't," she said gently, stepping closer. "Don't make it harder." He studied her face. "How long?" 96 hours. Less if they pushed the timeline. He turned away. "The coral nursery hasn't been logged. Your blood shell samples, already encrypted and packed. You're really leaving." Ilia exhaled, fingers tightening around the tablet she still carried. "We were never meant to stay," she whispered. "They tolerated us, but we were always guests. You don't feel like a guest to me, Esran. You feel like home." The words broke something in her. In all their months together, he had never said it aloud. They walked the tide pool path in silence, stopping only where the twin moons painted shadows across the water. Ilia crouched beside a puddle filled with translucent sea petals, small drifting creatures that pulsed with rhythmic light. She'd mapped every single one in the nearby shoals, knew which had mated, which were due to split, which sang under pressure. And now, she would leave it all behind. We were building something here, Esrin said, I know, not just you and me, he continued, kneeling beside her. This entire project, collaboration, learning, not taking, but becoming part of something. Your presence made it better. Not enough, she said. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. They spent the night in the lower cove, tangled together on smooth stone, bodies damp with salt. The tide came in slow, and when the water reached their feet, Ilya whispered stories of her childhood by the earth rivers and Esrin hummed a lullaby. From his ancestral currents. Neither said goodbye. They weren't ready. The evacuation began on the third day. Drones dismantled habitat modules. Storage vaults closed. The tide monitoring towers sank into hibernation mode. Ilya watched it all with a strange stillness, moving through her checklist as if her heart wasn't fracturing with every task. Esrin followed her from site to site, helping. Though no one had ordered him to, the council had already declared the reef a Zuran-controlled zone. He didn't have to stay, but he did. On the final night, he handed her a small vial of glimmer sand. What's this? I took it from the northeast reef, where the deep shells bloom after storms. She held it up. The grains inside shimmered pink, violet, blue. It sings, he said softly. If you hold it underwater, I'll try, and when you do, he said, stepping close, you'll hear me. She boarded the transport at dawn, the sea calm behind her. Esrin didn't speak again, but he stood at the edge of the cliff, eyes locked on hers, as the shuttle lifted away. As the sky swallowed the horizon, Ilya pressed the vial of glimmer sand to her chest. Months later, the reef remained unguarded. Council patrols reported stable currents, minimal disturbance, coral growth returning to pre-human baselines. But what they didn't report because they never knew was the way the tide pool path rearranged itself. Every moon cycle, or the tiny glass marker shaped like a ripplefish that appeared in the lower cove. Or how, if you swam deep enough near the old station site, you could still hear faint, melodic the hum of two voices. One singing, one remembering. The asteroid station orbiting the Dairon flare star was always half shadow, half light. Inside Relay 19, humans and non-humans worked in silent synchrony, tracking gravity pulses from nearby black holes, interpreting cosmic data few species bothered to study anymore. The station had no political value, no rare resources, just questions. And sometimes, love. Jenna Vale came from the Mars colonies, orphaned during a solar flare incident. She had grown up inside observatories and grav labs, her fingers learning to interpret gravitational drift before she ever learned to dance. Her laugh was rare, her voice low, her movements quiet like a system afraid to draw attention to itself. She served as the human head of waveform analysis aboard Relay 19. It wasn't glamorous. Just her, a half-dozen silent operators, and the endless noise of the cosmos. And Cogen, of the Dilly species. Cogen's people were crystalline organic hybrids, with lattice forms that shimmered under cosmic radiation. Their bodies grew in facets and prisms, voices low and harmonic, minds slow to anger, but quicker than most at understanding systems beyond visual dimensions. When he arrived aboard Relay 19, he brought no luggage, just a folded sculpture of his homeworld's root stone and a single question: do you know what longing looks like on a gravity chart? Jenna had said no. But now, 6 months later, she wasn't so sure. They didn't talk much at first. Dilly communication was mostly tone-based and nonverbal, relying on resonance and vibration rather than direct speech. Most humans found it disorienting. But Jenna, DIDN single quotes T. She didn't mind the silence, or the hum, or the way he tapped the edges of tables with his fingertips when he was thinking. Over time, she noticed things. How he paused before stepping into sunlit chambers, as though remembering something painful. How his voice vibrated just a little deeper when she was near. How the ambient temperature around her console was always slightly warmer when he passed. Khoj and noticed things. How she muttered equations under her breath like spells. How she always touched the railing before stepping through an airlock. How she laughed once when a neutrino spike made her coffee levitate for a moment. It was never a loud love, but it built itself across weeks and gestures and pauses. You ever been in love? Jenna asked him one day, half a joke. They were recalibrating the long-range sensors. Solar flares rolling lazily across the system's edge. Kogen tilted his head. Your definition of love may differ from mine. That's fair. But if it means to shift your internal rhythms in response to another, then yes. Once. She looked at him. What happened? They left, he said. Jenna nodded. Then, almost too quietly to hear, I might leave, too. The transmission arrived 3 days later. Begin wind down protocol. Phase separation active. Return to system core. Do not alert host species. Jenna stared at the text in her private cabin, the words bleeding into her chest. She knew it was coming. Humanity's retreat from shared stations had begun months ago. Quiet, efficient, thorough. Pulling back from outer systems, withdrawing from inner species. Research centers. Khojn would notice. Eventually, he wasn't a fool, but she didn't know how to say it. The next night, he found her on the viewing deck, staring at the flare star through polarized shielding. You're sad, he said. Double quotes. No, you are. The gravity around you shifts like regret. She didn't deny it. He sat beside her, his crystalline limbs folding with the sound of distant wind chimes. We're leaving, she said at last. Humans, the station, all of it. When? In 5 days. Kogen's skin darkened slightly, the color of distant storms. Why? It doesn't matter, she whispered. They don't want us here anymore. Maybe they never did. He was silent for a long time. Do you want to go? That's not the same question. It is to me. Jenna leaned back, her voice barely audible. I want to stay, but wanting's not enough. On the 4th night, she found a small crystal shard outside her door. A gift. Dyle tradition, she later learned. A symbol of connection, a bond not broken by distance or time. She placed it on her console, next to her radiation badge. It glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The day before departure, the gravity wells beyond the flare star erupted unexpectedly. An unstable singularity formed without warning. Alarms rang. Protocols failed. Jenna was thrown across the command deck, her head bleeding, her body crushed under a collapsing support beam. When she came to, the deck was dark, except for him. Khoj and glowing faintly, vibrating with frequency she couldn't interpret. His hands, shards of luminous crystal, lifted the wreckage from her side like it weighed nothing. You're hurt, he said, resonance unsteady. I'm okay, she lied. You bleed. Humans do that. He carried her to the medical bay, every step radiating with something she couldn't name. But she could feel it. Love, or something older. She woke to silence. The station was repaired. The flare had passed, the singularity had faded, and the human transport waited in orbit. She found him in the gravity lab, tuning a field projector by hand. I have to go, she said. I know. She reached into her coat, pulled out the crystal shard. Held it toward him. Does this mean anything to you? He looked down. It means everything. Then tell me not to leave. But he did in single quotes t. Instead, he stepped close and pressed his forehead gently to hers. A dilly farewell and promised. In one. She left that evening. No goodbye. Just the crystal still glowing in her pocket. And the pull of gravity. Long after she had left the star behind. Months later, Dilly scientists reported unexplained waveforms in the nearby sector, as if someone had mapped longing in the shape of a human heartbeat. The sky above Valmir was painted with 3 suns to warm, 1 cold. Beneath that strange and endless light, the city of Telesur emptied slowly. It had once been a shining example of unity between species, a shared settlement between humans and the native Ellery. Its buildings were graceful arcs grown from living crystal, fed by light, cooled by subterranean rivers. The Ellery had called it a promise. Humans had called it an achievement. Now, both called it something else. Nia Varden was the last human architect on Valmir. She stayed longer than the rest, cataloging what they left behind, scanning memories into hollow archives, collecting fragments of music left in the wine vaults, brushing dust off benches she had once shared with friends, and with Kieran. Kieran of the Ellery had eyes like falling dusk and a voice like wind through hollow stone. His people spoke not in command but in suggestion. their language full of pauses and implied meanings. He had been a historian once until the humans arrived. Then, he became something else. He became Nia's opposite. And then, her mirror. They had met in an argument over a mural. The humans wanted it moved to install emergency cooling vents. Kieran said the mural was older than their language. Nia had found a way to redesign the vents. After that, he began to walk with her through the crystal plazas each dusk, listening as she spoke of earth and iron and how cities were born from need. She didn't know when they began holding hands, only that it felt like truth. The withdrawal order came in pieces. First, the embassy closed, then the trade routes, then the hospitals and water archives. Nia stayed through it all. She pretended it was about data, about protecting the records of cooperation, about respecting the Ellery. But at WES and single quotes T. It was about him. On the final morning, she found Kieran waiting beside the shimmer fountain. His shoulders were wrapped in a white diaphanous shawl morning garb. "You're wearing it early," she said. "Am I? I haven't left yet." He didn't answer. Instead, he offered her a small cloth bundle. Inside was a hollow stone pendant. It pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of her breath. "You always carry silence inside," he said. "I thought it should have shape. Kieran, you don't have to say it." "I do." "Then wait," he whispered. "Say it tomorrow." That night, she walked the entire edge of the city. They'd once imagined expanding beyond the river ridge, building new bridges that crossed into untouched valley systems. Now, those plans sat unused in her archive. All she could do was leave the skeletons behind. In the central plaza, she activated the final archival beacon. A soft blue glow rose, capturing shapes, textures, echoes of laughter. One last gift, and then she returned to her quarters. Where he was waiting. They didn't speak. Not at first. They stood facing each other, the pale moonlight wrapping around them like thread. Then she said it. The words she'd carried for weeks. "I don't want to go." "Then stay," he said. "You know I can't." "Then don't say you love me." She looked up, eyes sharp. "I do." He stepped closer, so close she could hear the second heartbeat the Ellery possessed. "Then say it again." And she did. As he kissed her, slow and trembling, the human vessel arrived at dawn. Nia stood beneath the eastern gate, a small satchel over her shoulder. The pendant he had given her was tied around her neck. Kieran stood beside her, unmoving. They didn't kiss goodbye. Just stood in silence until the shuttle's lights flared. "I will remember you," he said. "Don't," she replied. "Why?" "Because remembering hurts." "Yes," he said. "That is the point." She didn't look back. Until the sky swallowed him. Years passed. The galaxy turned cold. Council records marked Valmir as abandoned shared settlements reassigned. Crystal architecture, left to decay. No signs of human life remained. No contact. No signals. Just silence. Until one night, a distant star in the uncharted rim flickered to life. A new colony hidden, blooming. And within that light, a pendant of hollow stone, hanging in a room filled with echoes, where someone waited, watching the stars and remembering a city built on shared breath and a love that didn't end with goodbye.